Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar entitled The Biggest Trends Impacting the UK Workforce. My name is Peter Banks. I'm the founder and MD of the HR Director. We are a strategic resource for senior HR and people leaders in print, person, and online. Delighted today to partner with Gallup, a global analytics and advice firm that helps leaders and organizations solve their most pressing problems. So during this webinar, we're going to kind of share and discuss results of their 2023 State of the Global Workforce Report and look to see if employee engagement and job opportunities surge globally, coming back in line really with pre-pandemic historical trends on economical development and growth. We will spotlight the results of the UK workforces where, let's face it, we're living in a nation struggling to control high inflation and spiraling living costs. And as organisational leaders endeavour to navigate an uncertain economic outlook, their employees' stress is impacting on productivity and performance. So addressing these wellbeing concerns and improving employee engagement and experience should be top priorities of business leaders in the UK, where reward, let's face it, will be replaced with recognition, and in order to retain and engage with workforces. So that's quite important for this one. So joining us today is Claire de Carteret, who is Managing Director EMEA of Gallup. So welcome, Claire. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Peter. Hi, James.
And also James Miller. James is the Chief People Officer at GBG Plc. So good morning, James, and thanks for taking part today.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so listen, let's find out a little bit more about our panel. Claire, if I can start with you, just tell us a little bit more about you, your role, and obviously your organisation, please.
Absolutely. Well, pleasure to be here today. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. My name is Claire de Carteret, Managing Director for Gallup Europe, Middle East and Africa, based in the London office. I've been with Gallup for 16 years, and my role of Managing Director is to work with leaders in organisations across the region to study and create workplaces that leave a net positive impact on people that work for them, their families and their customers. So we do that through analytics, advice and learning. And we believe that workplaces should be fulfilling, they should be developmental. And that's what we're here to do, is create workplaces that really do have an extraordinary impact on people.
Thank you, Claire. James, also, if you could tell us a little bit more about your role, organisation, and also employee numbers would be good as well. Thanks, James.
Yep, thanks, Peter. I'm James, Chief People Officer of GBG, which is the leading global identity provider. I've been with GBG about 8 years, and during that time, we've gone through quite a radical transformation program, 9 acquisitions and a couple of divestitures under our belt. And we've gone from a 400-strong UK-centric team to about 1,250 very globally diverse team. We've partnered with Gallup since 2019, although we've always had a focus on employee engagement during my time with the business. Currently, 93% of the GBG team would recommend us as a great place to work, and we were hugely proud to be one of only 57 recipients this year to meet the very rigorous standards of the Gallup Exceptional Workplace Award.
Thanks, James. Yes, all right. I can see that on your bio we've got your title and company wrong. So apologise. We'll get that one sorted. So, listen, right. Let's crack on then. Let's look at our first question. So, Claire, listen. Obviously, you've got this report. So, what do the results of the 2023 report mean to organisation leaders? I mean, probably we're concentrating on the UK a little bit here, but overall. So, give us a flavour.
Okay, so to put it into context for those that haven't picked up the report yet or are going to do so after this, every year we do a State of the Global Workplace report where we go and have a look at a representative sample of adult workers in almost every country in the world. So we cover a representative sample of 98% of the world's population through our world poll, and then we distill this into a report for leaders. So that's a little bit of context about the State of the Global Workplace report. And we're looking at all factors that relate to life at work and the impact of work on life. So this year, what we found is that globally, so I'll start with a bit of a global context and I'll drill down to the UK if that's okay, Peter, just to put it into perspective for everybody. But globally, 23% of people are thriving at work. They're engaged. This psychological category of people are connected, they're energized, they're committed to their work and their workplace. And that means that 59% are not engaged. Some refer to them, and in the report it's referred to them as quietly quitting. So if you've heard that term being thrown around a little bit in the last year or so, it's really the sense of not being engaged, coming into work, potentially going through the motions, but not being really emotionally connected. So that's globally. 51% of workers globally said that now is a good time to be actively looking for a new job. So almost half of our workers are watching or seeking new opportunities. I think that's a huge takeaway for leaders. Looking at Europe, 13% of people are engaged at work, and in the UK, only 10% of people are engaged at work. Only 10% of people are coming into work and they're really thriving. They're connected to their work, they're connected to their team and the organisation's mission. That's the big opportunity for us as leaders in the UK, is to think about how do we boost that 10%. Now, there are organisations in the UK that are really 7 to 10 times more engaged than that. So it is possible it's happening, but that's one of the major findings from the report. The other thing that I'll just point out that was quite alarming to us when we looked at it is the rise of negative emotions. So in the UK, daily anger went up by 4 percentage points from last year. So 19% of people feel daily anger. And stress is also very high in Europe. 39% of people are feeling stress a lot of the day yesterday. So there's this rise of negative emotions. There's this stagnating employee engagement and a growing confusion and dissatisfaction with work. Despite that, because that sounds really negative, so I do want to say despite that, and hence why we've got James here, there are organisations that completely debunk that, and they have really thriving, connected, engaged workplaces. So those are some of the kind of the headlines.
Yeah, okay. Can you just almost to start, just to go over quickly those stats on disengagement again in the UK? Could you just quickly run those numbers again?
Yes.
Briefly?
So in the UK, 10% of people are engaged. So only 10% of people are engaged in the UK. In fact, you know, I think this is something really for us to be aware of. A lot of people, when they're measuring engagement, a lot of organisations, when they're measuring engagement, may be adding 4s and 5s together to get more of an inflated view of engagement. But in reality, really that emotional commitment, that discretionary effort, that real connection to an organisation and a work group, it's quite an emotional factor, and that's only 10%.
Is that across all industry sort of thing? Does that give us is it all pretty broad?
Yes, it's a representative sample of UK workers. So just to give you a bit of perspective, in the US, for example, that number is higher again. So that number in the US is 23% of people thriving at work. So we've got a ways to go. We've got some work to do in the UK, and hence why it's good that we're all here having this conversation today.
James, so James, you're looking at this, you're bucking the trend here, aren't you? So let's talk about how you've managed to kind of swerve the trend on this continued workforce disengagement. And where's the magic? What do you think this is? What have you done? What have you been doing? Come on, James.
So to put it into context for people, against the numbers that Claire's shared, 23% globally engaged. At GBG, that number is currently 69%, with only 3% actively disengaged. I say only 3, I think we'd love to get that down if we could, but it's a very small proportion. And of course, there are things going on for those team members at any time, which may influence that. When we compare that then to Claire's UK stat, only 10% engaged, our UK engagement score is very consistent with our global, so it's 7 times the Gallup average in the UK. We are proud of these scores and for what the collective environment our team create for each other. But I think it's really important to say this hasn't happened quick or easily. This has been a constant and meaningful focus over a number of years. This is a core part of our culture, and actually we embed our engagement and our team at the heart of our culture and our decision making. We've found that actually by trusting our team, they trust us as a leadership team. And that decision-making process to some extent is made easier. So from an engagement perspective, we've improved this by actively involving our team, being very transparent with how we've done with results year on year, and then involving them, whether that's through focus groups or action planning, and playing that back, and if almost getting into that cycle of survey, check, understanding, involve, make a priority and stick to it, and then ask again. You know, we're in that 6-monthly cycle, and that means that over 16 surveys since I joined, we've had improvement of our results every time. But it is important to sort of stress that our scores did plateau a little bit, but of course, you know, that they are rather high. So you have to realise at the end, and you have to manage expectations within your management team. It gets a point where it becomes more challenging. But some of the things that we're doing that have driven the participation up as well as the results, transparent communication. As I said, during the pandemic, we instantly moved to live Ask Us Anything webinars once a week. Myself and the CEO host live webinars in multiple time zones, 5-minute business update, and then Ask Us Anything questioning. No pre-submitted questions, so you see the whites of our eyes when we're answering, and we never answer a question offline because we really want that transparency for our team. And you've really seen that evolve over the couple of years. We've kept that going post-pandemic because we just can't take it away now. People love it, and we get more than half our team join every single one. We've introduced changes to our performance process we call the check-in to make it more frequent. We've made progression easier for people and a lot more visibility around that. We try to be very open and honest with all of our changes in the business, good and bad, and that links back to our trusted behaviours that we've implemented in the last couple of years. And then one of the other things that comes out in the survey is this focus on caring about people as an individual, and we put a huge focus around personal well-being and mental support of our team. So that sort of feels like those things now are embedded as well, and we've not stripped any of that away post-pandemic, which I think a lot of companies did when they felt that those things didn't need to be focus areas anymore, or they had cost constraints that meant they needed to put the money somewhere else.
James, just a quick one here. So you may have said it, but I may have missed it. So what participation levels did you get within your within those results there, within your numbers?
Our last survey, we had 94% of the team globally choose to participate in it. And one of the things I talked about is the importance of transparency and involvement. We were 7-8 years ago getting less than 70% participation. People now believe that something's going to happen with the information they share, and that's the core reason that now it's not difficult for us to get that sort of participation level. And that's included in our recent acquisitions as well.
That's excellent. Claire, just one quick question from someone actually about engagement. Just how do you define engagement within that report? What just define engagement for us all?
Absolutely. It's the psychological and emotional commitment to one's work, to their work group and their work. So it's emotional. It's a discretionary effort. I call it a care factor, but it's defined as that psychological commitment to my work.
Thank you. And James, just back to you quickly, briefly, those survey results, how then do you again on this communicate those back to the workforce?
We've chosen to do our survey through the Gallup platforms every 6 months. We think that's frequent enough to be a pulse without making it onerous, so actually people lose energy around it. Sometimes it can take a month or two to actually get your action plan live. So we do it every 6 months, and that definitely helps us sort of stay with enough energy around it without it becoming onerous on the business activity.
And how is that delivered back to the workforce?
So actually, completely transparently, what we've found is the best way is to give managers access to their results the day that they're published. Don't hide away from that. We get a summary result out at an email or webinar level to all team the day they're published. We never worry about showing any change in that. Very transparent again. And then managers action plan with their teams within a few weeks of that happening. And everyone's encouraged to lean in and become part of the action planning process with their manager. So actually everyone can see right down to the nitty-gritty. And we also share comparison results against different functions and locations as well, so that managers can identify where is someone doing really well and say, well, we used to have a challenge with that, so I'm going to connect with that leader and understand what did they do in their last action plan.
Okay, great. Listen, that's terrific. Let's get on to our first poll. So this will pop up on your screen, everyone. So do have a go at this, and then we'll feed the results back in. So, in light of Gallup's recent findings, what will be your main priority for the next 12 months? So, is it A, workforce planning stroke headcount? Is it B, build and maintain recognition? Is it C, recruitment? Is it D, retention? Or is it E, culture transformation? So if you can have a go at that one for us, and whilst you do, give you a few seconds to, James, just give us your thoughts on what you think might come out top here.
Whilst I think a lot of people are going to have focus around headcount and workforce planning, I really hope that there's focus around building and maintaining recognition and engagement. I think that's really critical to make sure that our existing team feel that we're really focused on what's best for them.
Okay, and Claire, what are you going to go for?
I've actually got a perspective from the State of the Global Workplace report from the perspective of the employees. So with that in mind, I'm interested to see how the leaders on the call respond. But I have to agree, I think it's going to be around culture or building, maintaining recognition and engagement.
Okay, right. Wow, very, very good. So let's feed those results back in. I think we're all in. Yeah, you win a prize there, Claire. So yeah, it's absolutely 43% culture and transformation is top. 31% retention, 15% build and maintain recognition. So that's they're in there. So yeah, I guess, Claire, any surprises there then?
No, in fact, actually pleasantly surprised because it matches the perspective of employees. So when we asked people in this representative sample of UK workers, of global workers, what were the 3 major things that they wanted their organisations and their employers to change, the first one, at 41% of people responding strongly to this one, was engagement or culture. So people want to see higher levels of engagement. They want a better workplace culture. Second one at 28% was pay and benefits. And the third one at 16% of people strongly agreeing to that was wellbeing. So I think that matches maybe what leaders here are listening for and hearing.
James, any thoughts on that, or anything to add?
I did find it quite surprising, actually. I thought there'd be more focus on workforce planning, but maybe that shows that people have sort of gone through now some of that early thinking on how they react to the external environment, and are focused on more important internal items too.
The questions whilst we're sort of at this point then. So just one thing, just I guess from action plans, probably to you, James, really. So how are action plans needing senior team involvement communicated back to the senior team? Is that something you do, or how do you do that? That makes sense?
Yeah, so what we do is we look at the lowest possible manager to action plan. That gives us about 100 managers across the business action planning at any time, because then it's really, the result is as refined and as close to the team members giving feedback as possible. So then what we do is we then look at themes in that and aggregate the results up to each executive or functional level as well. From that, usually we choose a sort of global priority that everyone's focused on. That doesn't change anyone's action planning. It just means that we put a few more resources behind it at a group level to support our managers too. So yeah, very transparent in the action plans, and make sure that the execs see the themes, but leave our frontline managers in control of that.
Yeah, you mentioned you know, transparency a few times, which I think is just absolutely right, isn't it? I think that's where your real big wins there.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the sort of core parts of the culture of GBG. We've always tried to be as transparent as possible with our team. Of course, there are some things, being a listed business, that it's more challenging to do that. But it's really where you test the culture, isn't it? Because your behaviours are how you show up every day for your team. And we feel that actually being trusted by our team is about being honest and transparent with them, as if every opportunity, treating everyone as adults and making sure we're building in the insight that they give back, because it is a very distributed team, so we can't always know exactly how people are feeling on the ground in every location.
Claire, anything to add to that?
I think, you know, we do see that some organisations want to protect managers from the results. They want it to be a HR-led initiative, but there's an evolution there, and an evolution of thinking that says actually managers have got the biggest impact on engagement of their local team. So let's put this in the hands of the managers. So I love what GBG do around making the results accessible immediately to managers, the transparency of the conversation to build trust, and that drives an ownership, an extreme ownership around wanting to take the results and do something with it for their local work groups. So definitely best practices in terms of disseminating results.
Brilliant. Lots of questions coming in, so we'll do as many as we can, but we obviously need to shift on. But just thoughts on leadership training, leadership coaching skills. How does that come into this? I guess, James, do you use that in terms of delivery?
We've made sure that there are really good routines and tools available to all our managers, so that they're equipped to be successful in delivering the results, and then planning around this topic specifically. Of course, it's built into all of our sort of training programs. We have something called Lead at GBG, which all our people managers have access to, so that we're able to build that language and consistency in the ask to everyone. So it's there, but actually, you know, we've probably put more focus around things like mentoring, actually, because whether you think about actually how am I successful as a new manager doing engagement planning for the first time, well, let's pair you up with someone who's great at it. But also, mentoring has been something that's been good for us, because, you know, it's a very low cost activity, and we're prioritizing our resources carefully at the moment. So
Okay, great. Let's just move on, and then we will get back to some of these questions a bit later. So let's just in the absence of time. So Claire, just give us a flavour of your, the difference, I guess, in terms of the terminology of reward and recognition.
So often reward and recognition are clubbed together, aren't they? But we see them quite distinctively. And often they should be clubbed together in terms of programs and systems. But really, when we think about recognition and the way the very best teams behave, recognition really doesn't cost anything at all. It's an acknowledgement of someone's contribution, it's listening, it's a conversation, it's a thank you, it's a high five. It's that kind of recognition that really gives people a boost every week. I often say engagement is a contact sport. It doesn't happen in the absence of conversations. The recognition piece really is about seeing and acknowledging someone's contribution, different to reward, which may be about pay and benefits and some of those other things that organizations are addressing. But recognition really is about the conversation. But when it comes down to it, work is about contribution. When I looked work up in the dictionary, the description is toil, drudgery, labour. I actually think we should remove that word work from our vocabulary and replace it with contribution and participation, because that's really what people need acknowledgement for every week.
And in the kind of absence of reward for UK workers, I guess in these more difficult times, how would you advise the leaders to sort of engage and retain their staff?
So in terms of recognition, it's about acknowledging what people are contributing in that moment, in that week. So that means that managers and leaders need to be plugged in. They need to be having conversations. They need to see and acknowledge people. And that's the difference between the high-performing teams and the mediocre or the average teams, is that those high-performing teams are seeing, connecting, acknowledging. I think of it a little bit like sporting teams. The best sporting teams, they're calling time out, they're course correcting, they're high-fiving. That's what high-performing work groups look like. And so that's the best way to be thinking about engaging people where, in the absence of being able to do anything much with financial rewards. There are 12 factors that managers should look at, which are the employee needs at work that would help them boost engagement, that can be used as a framework for conversations. Interestingly, it's also the Q12 by which we measure engagement at the local work group and the overall organisation.
James, just with your own experiences, with your own organisation, has retention been good? I'm going to probably think yes. And how have you been engaging with your workforce?
Yeah, the recognition piece has been important to us too, actually, and the very simple things like peer-led processes for giving awards out, high fives. We have a high five mechanism on our intranet, so I love that Claire said that. But yes, we've seen our attrition decrease. We've also seen our overall diversity, especially gender, improved, especially at management levels in the business over the last couple of years, which is good to see. And I think those things come together because we've got a focus on our overall talent life cycle, being clear on development and progression opportunities, like the mentoring that I talked about earlier. We've introduced a concept of ultra flexibility for our team, and that's really delivered for us. We call it work when and where you want, and it's exactly that. It gives people complete flexibility over the hours and location of their work, and that applies to all roles in all locations. And a third of our team in the open-ended comments of their survey quote work when and where as the thing that really engages them at GBG, because they recognise the trust that it gives them, but the flexibility to think about home and caring responsibilities and those sort of things, or just working from a coffee shop that they love, or going on an extended holiday and deciding to stay there and do some work afterwards. We give everyone the ability to work abroad for 3 months of the year. So those sort of things have definitely helped. But also, in the absence of ability to change salaries, we've put more focus on long-term incentives in the business too. And that's definitely helped us from a retention perspective. The tech talent that we're generally looking for is still a very, very competitive market, and there's a lot of very well-funded startups that don't need to be profitable. So you're not necessarily on an even playing field when you're a PLC and thinking about actually profitability and those sorts of things.
Talent is always a hot topic, isn't it? Just so we're on tech, actually. So just a question about AI, and kind of, is this, I guess, on the agenda for you, James, and obviously, Claire, are you seeing this on this topic, on the topic of kind of engagement and is it kind of seen as something to be feared or embraced? Have you thoughts on that, Claire?
Well, yes. So I think generative AI is going to be really helpful in terms of individualizing communication, individualizing and preparing for difficult conversations. I think we will see leaders embracing it a lot more. It is going to augment the quality of conversations, I think, that are happening in organizations if leaders and managers have those coaching skills that complement it. So it won't replace the conversation. Yeah.
Are you using it at all at the moment or looking to?
Machine learning and AI are built into a lot of the products and tools that we develop for our customers. So we're looking at how we can utilize those internally too. We don't use it extensively officially internally yet, but there's definitely opportunity from a process perspective to help the team. And ultimately, one of the things that we have through the sort of culture that I've tried to describe to you is we try and put information in the hands of our team and then to make that useful for them. So I think those sort of tools and self-service capabilities will definitely advance as a result of it. But I don't think anyone really knows the true impact that that's going to have on their own organisation yet. And I think maybe I'm getting a little older and a little bit more sceptical, but I think anyone who claims that they do understand that fully maybe is looking that through just one set of glasses.
And this is probably Claire for you then, and probably James, but this one deals on with scores rising. I guess we're talking about the kind of engagement scores here. Do expectations rise also, and does this impact scores in future results? Do you feel, Claire?
I think if engagement scores are high, if people are highly engaged, they've maintained expectations to remain highly engaged, and they have those expectations of each other. So it becomes a bit of a cultural phenomenon, if you will, like that momentum builds. So yeah, definitely, I think it's when you're working with high talent people, highly engaged people, the caliber does rise. So it's just as hard to maintain, or maybe not hard, but just as much of a commitment to maintain a highly engaged work group or organization as it is to create it in the first place. James, what would you say?
I think one of the things that that all leaders need to be very mindful of is having an you mustn't let an engaged culture stray into an entitled culture. And it's very easy to for people to claim that you can't give the difficult message or take something away because it's going to damage engagement in some way. It would be very easy to use that as your rationale for not doing anything that you really need to do in your business because it might damage engagement. I think you have to have really honest and open conversations with people, and therefore actually, yes, it's difficult to get there. Sometimes it's just as hard to maintain it because the steps that you take then to improve become much more refined. As I said, you know, giving 100 managers the opportunity to action plan rather than creating one group action plan is a great example of us doing that. But we don't allow people to just do anything, because that would then stray into the sort of the sense of entitlement that people might get through it.
James, just talking about steps here. So you know, what's your suggestions for simple steps for everyone? You know, in terms of if someone's starting their journey on improving engagement. So what can employers do?
Yeah, I think firstly, listen to the team, involve them in the process, that sort of journey and action planning process that I've talked about, because that will build trust, but also it's a very open dialogue. You know, we trust is sort of at the core of everything we do from a talent perspective in the business. Make sure that you're thinking about how you build in diversity and inclusion into that too, because that creates a sort of sense of belonging and empowerment. Use flexibility where you can. Flexibility is like a core benefit for people now. It's seen as like a non-monetary reward that everyone expects. People will jump ship just for more flexibility, even if they're, we've found, sometimes looking for less financial reward. So, you know, trusting the team around flexibility. But I think most importantly, a regular and meaningful conversation with the team member to understand how they're feeling about things. Because then, as I said earlier, whether it's about their well-being, or it's about that connection, or it's about how you prioritize your time so that you're effective, you know, all of those things will have a lot of benefits if you're taking that very simple step of making sure that that regular, meaningful conversation happens. And the definition of regular is often challenged, but ultimately it comes down to what's meaningful for that team member, not for the manager. You know, and I think that's different for everyone based on how experienced they are and how remote they are from the rest of the team and that sort of thing.
So on that, as really, we just a question bang on in terms of remote flexible working. So, you know, and this is how do you challenge managers to be open about remote flexible work for their teams? What did they do for anyone resisting this? How have you tackled that?
We've always built our tools and systems as if someone isn't local. When I joined the business, as I said, it was very UK centric out of Chester, and it was almost like you couldn't get things done if you weren't in the corridor. So I just said, you know, every process we build, it must work in Jakarta first. If it works there, it will work in Chester. So we always built all of our systems and processes to be fully remote learning and things like that. I think that helped us go quick in the pandemic, but then in opening the door and showing people how much talent is available to them if they're more open to location has helped. But also giving managers the skills and tools to be successful, to make sure that they are understanding the importance of different communication styles when you're managing a hybrid team, what that looks like. How do you run a team meeting? You know, if you're not a very experienced manager, how do you engage someone? How do you make them feel part of the conversation if they're not there? But most importantly, don't make it feel like you're checking up on someone and go, unfortunately, so we see in some businesses more micromanagement when someone becomes remote or they're managing a remote team for the first time because that trust isn't there. So I think you've got to some extent let the team set their own rules day to day and how they work, but make sure the company is really clear in the principles of what its expectation of everyone is. And we definitely did that through saying work when and where is in place, and that means that no one is required to come into an office if they don't want to. And that core principle, so managers couldn't say you must come in once a week or you must be in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which seems to be the most common thing. So it's then up to the team to decide how they want to work.
Claire, did you have anything to overview on that one?
Only that we've got a paper around a study we did on hybrid remote working. So if if leaders are looking for some ideas on where engagement tipping point happens and how to support managers, as James mentioned, to have the skills to be great remote managers or great remote coaches, then there's some really good tips in there. I think really importantly, the one statistic that I have to share is that your local manager accounts for up to 70% of your experience at work. So if you've heard that people join an organisation, they may leave because of a manager, that's accurate a lot of the time. And so up to 70% of the variation in any organisation is explained by the manager. And yet I don't think managers have the support, the scaffolding, the skills, the tools to truly be effective, because most of the time they've been promoted because they were excellent practitioners or individual contributors, or they've been around for a really long time, right? So then we put them in managing people, leading people, coaching, without necessarily really supporting them, and yet they're critical. So I would say, think about how we're supporting managers as coaches, as mentors, and giving them some tools and scaffolding to be really effective, remote or otherwise.
Claire, if I may, correct me if I'm wrong in your information, but my understanding is that as long as a manager is equipped to be successful in that and gives the right support to their team member, whether in the office, hybrid or remote, actually engagement can still be just as high. And indeed, we see slightly higher engagement in our team members that are given full flexibility over the choice than those that are told to come in a few days a week.
Yeah,
that's
great.
Brilliant. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and James, someone here is very loves your point about entitlement. You know, engagement can't mean entitlement. And just intrigued on how do you make that clear within your sort of communications and culture to the workforce?
Yeah, so when we run our survey every 6 months, we chose to add a couple of extra questions to it. We were doing this before we partnered with Gallup. I wanted to carry that on. The two simple questions we asked were, as GBG grows, what's the one thing in the culture we should maintain? And what's the one thing you'd change if you could? And we saw in the one, especially the one thing you'd change, we saw these enormous challenges 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and you sort of thought, how are we going to put our arms around that one? And now over the years, we've refined it right down to, oh, there's this word in our policy. We don't really like that word in the policy. You know, would we consider changing it? So we've action planned all of that stuff in. But what we are very careful to do is, it doesn't matter how often someone maybe talks about pay and benefits, or they talk about they would like this benefit. You can't just keep layering stuff on because people think, oh, if we all sort of speak up, then you're going to do that because you're going to be worried about the impact. So we're very open with people, and especially with those sort of investment choices, we go out to our team and say, look, we can do this over here, or we can do that over there, but we can't do both. And if you want something that's come up high on the engagement survey, that would probably mean us doing these things, taking these things away, or you know, and I think involving people in those choices has helped us, rather than creating that expectation you're going to say yes all the time. We definitely don't say yes just because we think that will get us a better result. This is about driving the impact on the business, and it's not about the score that we try and achieve every 6 months.
And Peter, if I might add,
Yeah, Claire.
as well, it's really important to understand engagement is not the same as happiness or contentment. Actually, those can be measured very differently, but engagement is predictive of performance. So really, it's a barometer or a framework for what conditions are required to be able to perform at highly engaged levels. So that, I think that's the difference.
I think that's a key difference to make. Absolutely, to explain that. Okay, let's run on to our next poll if we can. So this one again will pop up on your screen, everyone. So let's have a look at this one. So this one is, why do you think employee engagement is so low in the UK? So is it A, lack of employee recognition in the workplace? Is it B, lack of development opportunities? Is it C, lack of interaction with management? D, lack of reward opportunities? Or is it E, external factors beyond the control of the business? So yeah, if you can all vote on that one, and we'll see what the consensus is. Again, while we're waiting, briefly, Claire, any predictions? What will be top?
I'm a little reluctant to guess, but if you were forcing me, I would say it would be lack of interaction with management. Let's see.
Okay, James?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, but I think, I'm not sure that will be the result that will come out actually, but I do think that's probably the key driver here.
Right, well, let's have a little look. So pretty much settling down. So, okay, so 36% lack of employee recognition in the workplace is top. 31% lack of interaction with management. Only 15% split with external factors and lack of development opportunities, and 3% lack of reward. So, yeah, interesting. Claire, any surprises there?
They're all important. One of the things that we noticed is that 91% of people that left their job in the last 12 months did so because they didn't think they'd have the development opportunities within their own organisation. So I think development is really key, and certainly when we're talking about in the absence of financial rewards, development opportunities, key experiences, skill building, those magic moments are really important. But you know, I think those results are probably what I thought people might say.
James, similar?
I was a little surprised actually that the result for external factors wasn't higher. I think if we did the same poll with some of our operational managers, they would probably say it's that. Not saying that about GBG, I just think in general, a lot of managers would say, you know, they can't control this. There's all of this other stuff going on because of the macroeconomic situation you described at the opening. I think if managers are connected with their team and having that regular conversation, they would understand the things that they can control and support team members with, and I think that will create a good result for the business. So I was pleased to see that come up higher.
I think we all spoke about at the start with, you know, before this, didn't we? And I think we're all quite pleased that that doesn't show high, that external factors. So good. Okay. Well, let's move on to our next point then. So so Claire, you know, let's talk about, you know, disengagement again. So, you know, from your Gallup perspective, you know, what steps do you think you know, I guess organizations should take to discover if their employees are disengaged?
So the first thing I'll say is if employees are not engaged or actively disengaged, it doesn't mean that they're bad people or necessarily bad performers. It means that their needs are not being met. So the first thing that every organisation should be doing is measure. Don't guess, measure and try to get a baseline of how people are feeling and experiencing your workplace, and measure consistently, because what gets measured gets managed. So this is one of the balanced scorecard metrics, along with, you know, profitability. We should be looking at how people are feeling. So measure, don't guess, listen regularly. So measure regularly. We at Gallup believe in the importance of benchmarking. Really important. Average could be the best of the worst or the worst of the best. So in order to know how you're doing, what does good look like? What does excellence look like? So get the baseline, measure regularly, don't guess, compare, and then most importantly, act and support managers and teams to follow through on what comes up. You know, it's not just about raising the number, it's about what the number raises. And so again, it goes back to having a conversation around, well, you know, this is our scorecard, this is how we're feeling, what do we collectively want to do about it, and follow through. It won't happen from time one to time two. It takes time, it takes commitment. I kind of call it a culture tilt rather than a culture change. You know, you're tilting and it's not necessarily linear. So stick with it and get that commitment at the top to continue building an exceptional culture.
Let's talk, we touched on it slightly. I think James mentioned it about inclusion. So James, you know, again, in your experiences, you know, how important is inclusion within the topic of engagement?
Yeah, I think it's critical actually, because Claire talks there about actually how do you develop the right culture for the business. And I think to get that right, this needs to be on people's agenda. It's not a nice to have like it was. Unfortunately, even 5 years ago, I think we put a lot of focus on this. Someone can't be their, they can't be their true authentic self, and if the business doesn't support it, and then they can't deliver at their best if that's not the case. So, you know, we've put a lot of focus around this. We have a program called Be Yourself. It's designed to promote understanding across the broad range of cultures we've got in the business, but also put inclusion, diversity, and equity, belonging sort of at the centre of the conversation. And we do that through 50 volunteer champions that are dotted around the world who support us and help us understand what local sentiment is on things and roll out programs. But we've tried to make that as broad as possible. So whilst there's often focus, because of things that are happening in the national press, and especially in the Americas, where we've got a lot of team around race and religion and gender, there's been that focus. But we've done more unusual topics as well, like social status and class, and how does that impact how someone feels inclusion at work. So we've broadened it as much as possible, made it a core part, and I think that sort of then comes back to the trust culture that I've described, but also the ability of someone to feel like they want to be part of that. It's helped us definitely from a attraction and retention perspective too, though that wasn't the reason we wanted to do it.
Claire, you know, from obviously your reports telling us about, you know, what's it telling us about the importance of inclusion, and what would be your advice, you know, for everyone today?
Very similar to what James said. You know, I think it comes back to see me, hear me, acknowledge my contribution. And in order for us to really do that well, we have to see the individual, we have to listen to them, they have to feel included, and they have to be well for them to be able to perform at their best. So it's absolutely critical, and it goes hand in hand with highly engaged, top performing organizations.
Okay. All right. So I think we've got a few questions as well. So I wanted to just see if we can, actually we'll pick some of these up because some came in a little bit earlier. There's been a lot of questions. So thank you all, by the way, really, really good to get those. James, I don't think you could go back to, we were talking about action plans. I think you very much talked about action plans at the start. I don't know if you can share any of those sort of actions, you know, coming out of the action plans. What sort of things do you put forward, I guess?
What we try to do is, Claire talked about the sort of 12 factors impacting engagement, the Q12 as it's known, and we try to make sure that each element of an action plan is clearly linked back to one of those. We talk to our managers and say, just focus on one or two things you think will make a difference. There's always that desire to try and improve everything, and I sort of say, if you focus on 3 or 4 things, you're not going to really know which of those made a difference in your result or not. So choose one thing, put enough effort around it, and if it doesn't work, that's fine. We can try something else next time. It's only 6 months away. So, you know, continually challenging that process, but definitely getting people to focus on less rather than more in that, I think helps a lot.
Claire, any kind of thoughts there from you as well?
In terms of just the consistent framework, I think that creates that language is really important. It kind of comes back to don't guess. We could all take a stab in the dark and guess at what people want. We may or may not get it right, and so that's where the measurability and a framework that can be replicated consistently across the organisation, provide a framework for conversations is really, really powerful.
Okay, so what else have we got? So Claire, this one for you then. So which countries have the highest engagement from your report?
So regionally, the US has got the highest engagement, but there are countries within almost every region with very high engagement. In Europe, it's Romania. Romania's got the highest engagement in Europe as a region in our report. So interesting, and I would say go and study the report, study where you have a workforce, so you can understand maybe how people are feeling in that market as compared to your own engagement results.
And Eddie, why? Why would be the question? Why are those countries sort of outperforming?
It's a good question. I think, there is something around cultural perspective that comes into it. We see in some markets in Asia more of a central bias. And we do see in Europe, and in fact, we've got a great article that came out last year that said, Europe, great place to live, lousy place to work, or something like that, because well-being was really high in Europe, but people's relationship with their workplace or their engagement, so to speak, was relatively low. Actually, to making a change, I think it's fair to say that in Europe, we're still very high.
You're a little bit delayed, Claire.
Can you hear me now? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Don't worry. Let's move. I'll just move on to James whilst your internet. I think it's your internet sorts it out. So this one, James, just we've got about 3 minutes to go. So not all senior leaders get the importance of engagement. How can we change this thinking? And I think there's this thought that they can often see it as a nice add-on, as opposed to the importance of it. Your thoughts on that?
I think this is why we've worked hard to sort of put it at the sort of core of our strategy, so that our team members and our managers especially understand that actually if we get it right for our team will get it right for the customer, and then that will lead to the right sort of business results overall for our external stakeholders. So probably we make sure that's really built into our recruitment and assessment processes for our leadership anyway, because ultimately if you don't really believe in that, being honest, GBG is probably not the right place for you to come and want to manage a team, because there is that expectation that it's going to work. But there are there's so many studies on this showing that the core benefits of, if you get this right for your team, you're overall going to have great return on that investment. It's really about making sure that your managers have the time to focus on it, so it doesn't become an excuse that they can't do it, because I think that's when it starts to fall away, and people try to create reasons for themselves as to why they don't need to focus on it over all the other priorities. So we've all got prioritization issues. There's a lot for us to do given the challenging business environment, but we try and keep this up there in the conversation and in the allocation of tasks.
Okay, thanks. Listen, we are pretty much out of time, so I think in light of that, there are a few more questions that we've got, but we will come back to you afterwards. So I'll literally share those with the panel, and we'll get a response back to you, to those people who've asked. So thank you for those. But listen, it's been a terrific webinar, and we hope we've sort of provided you some useful and interesting viewpoints along today with Gallup survey results. To help you and your organisation endeavour to navigate an uncertain economic outlook, certainly here in the UK, reduce your employee stress and the impact on productivity and performance. So addressing these wellbeing concerns and improving employee engagement experience should be top priorities of business leaders in the UK, as we said. So where reward will we need to replace with recognition, and in order to gain and engage with workforces. My thanks today to my panel. So thank you, Claire and James, for your excellent insights and knowledge. Sorry, Claire, we lost you a little bit at the end there. And to Gallup for partnering with us. Says there will be a recording which we'll kind of tidy up and get to you so you can share with colleagues, and we'll also add some useful links as well for some things we talked about today. Thank you all for watching and taking part, and I hope you can join us for another webinar soon. So thank you, Claire, and thank you, James, and bye for now, everyone.